after Jeremy's and Christoph's excellent demos of using Dagger for building, testing, and packaging code, I would like to show you how I use Dagger in ways which goes beyond CI/CD. But first, there is a story behind this first slide. You can see it bottom left. Bottom left, there is a story behind that slide. And I know that you'll appreciate this is the right audience for this story. Who can tell me what my name, Gerhard, would be in Barnduch? Jeremy? Christoph. Christoph would know, I'm sure.
So in French, it will be Gerhard.
Mm-hmm. And in Barnduch, this is specifically to like burn, right? Like, for example, Andreas would be Andu, just to give you a hint. Andreas, Andu. Johan, Gera. I think he's very, very close. I think he's very close. So 5 years ago, the last time that I gave an in-person talk in Bern, I learned from Andreas Weber, who I don't think he's on the call, but maybe he'll watch the recording. So I learned from him that my short name in Barnduch, maybe I'm not pronouncing it correctly, would be Geru, which is short for Gerhard. But if Johan says it's Gera, you know what? I need to create another email address. So I have an exclusive email address for people from Bern. Okay, it's geru@lazu.ch. I created this for you, and no one has used it yet, so you could be the first one, but only if you're from Bern. Okay, so that's the story behind that first slide. Okay, so if you want to ask any questions whatsoever, you can do so asynchronously. You can scan the code, this QR code, or you can go to Slido and you can put the questions there. You can do them anonymously, so you don't have to leave a name. But also I'm trying to make this a little bit more interactive. So there will be some questions for you, some polls. So there are only two, so nothing too crazy, but just like to feel that we're closer. We're in the same room. All right. So I will start by sharing how the Dagger CLI connects to the engine. So today that will be the focus because many things build on top of this. There's some magic there. There's a lot of things which I don't think are as well understood as they could be. There is change coming, important change coming, but just understand how this works, I think it's important. Okay. So I'm sure that you know that Dagger distributes as a CLI, right? When you download, when you run it, is that executable, the binary? It runs across multiple platforms. And the Dagger CLI is the one that automatically provisions the engine the first time you run it. And the requirement is that for this magic to work, you need to have Docker available locally. So down on the left is what we're trying to do, and down up on the left is my terminal. So I'm in pwd, right, my home directory, and I'm going to check what Dagger CLI I have installed. It's 0.11.9, which is the latest available currently. The other thing which I need to have is Docker installed for this to work. And the thing which is really important is the server. Because if you have the CLI, if you have the Docker CLI, but it doesn't establish a connection to the Docker server, you won't get this version. You'll just see an error. So this is important. And as you can see, mine is running on Linux, which version I'm running. So you can see a couple of details there, but that's as far as we'll go. Cool. So first thing down. With these things installed, this is the next command that we're going to run. Okay, we're going to call, and this is how you read that. We're going to call the neofetch function from this module, sysI. Dagger call, we give it to URL, boom, call that function. And this is the output. So what happened behind the scenes? Okay, we're trying to understand, again, the perspective is when we do this Dagger call, how does it interact with Docker and the engine? How does that work? So to see how that works, we're going to run the same command, but we're going to run it with the debug mode. So all we did just for you to see this better, I'm going to, let me just put it there. There, boom. Call, say, module neofetch -d. That's a special flag, which will run it in debug mode. I'm redirecting the standard error to standard out. And I'm using grep, which is a fancy grep, to look for all occurrences of Docker, every single line, and I'm ignoring everything else. And this is what I see. I see a lot of detail, but it mentions all like the Docker lines. The important one is you can see here, it says connecting runner Docker image, and it has a default Docker image. So internally, if you don't provide anything, this is how it knows that, hey, I'm going to use a Docker image, I'm going to default to this one. It matches the CLI version with the engine version. And you'll see a couple of interesting things here, like exec Docker start, Dagger engine. So this is really, really interesting because it just gives you a bit of a perspective into how the interaction works. And by the way, if you were to search this in code, you would find this in the Go code of Dagger. Cool. So it's a bit like this. So if you haven't seen that, if you don't know how these things are put together, it's a bit magical, right? Everything just works. You don't know why, but it's that Docker image, which is the default, which is built in, which just makes everything work. Cool. So that's one way. And by the way, you can specify these Docker images so you can use custom ones. Maybe you have an internal registry, you can change this. All right. Now, you also have to ensure compatibility, by the way, between the CLI and the engine when you do that, but that's another story. So another way that we use Docker, so another way of basically connecting between the CLI and the engine is to specify a container. In this case, it's the same assumption. The CLI exists, the Docker CLI exists, but now we have provisioned manually, ahead of time, a container in Docker, and we'll connect the CLI to that Docker container. And Docker container is the protocol that makes that happen. So let's see. Okay. What I would like to show you now is what we have in our Dagger repository. So in the Dagger repository, and by the way, you can reproduce all these commands. So I'll go to main, and it will put me in the Dagger work tree. And I'm going to call with dev. Let's see, I should have it here somewhere. And that's the one, fast fetch. Okay. So this is just a script which basically changes a couple of things, and it tells the CLI, hey, there's a development engine which I created for you, connect to it. And it will also use, by the way, the dev CLI. So it's just like a bit of magic, which just makes everything work. But it basically runs the same module against the latest development engine and CLI, which have been built from my checked out repository. And again, anyone can run this as long as you have those dependencies. Cool. Docker container, you can see it here, Dagger engine dev. And this just gets provisioned with dev. All right. So the one thing which I want to mention here is Docker host. So in my case, if I look at Docker host, my Docker host is configured to TCP. So I'm connecting, this is on my internal network, right? So it's secure on my LAN, and I'm connecting directly to the Docker server. Now, if you use Docker host and you're connecting via SSH, there's something that you need to know. So the first thing which I'm going to run this command, which will show me, I'm basically connecting to the same host, but I'm connecting via SSH. Perfectly possible, especially if you, by default, right, Docker doesn't bind to the TCP port. So you would need to do this to connect to Docker. Now, if we do this, we run exactly the same thing, exactly the same command. Look at the difference. And by the way, this has already been cached, right? This has already run, so there's no difference here. Let's see how long it takes. Almost there. Same thing is happening. 16 seconds. Just because you're using a different protocol, a slower protocol. I'm going to use it again, just for you to see all the interaction. Still possible, remote Docker, but slower. All right. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to switch back to, so there you go, 14 seconds. Cool. I'm going to set myself back, right? I just have a function which exports the host and 3 seconds, right? It's exactly the same Docker, same cache, same everything. The only difference is the protocol. So it makes a big difference. And that brings us to the first poll. For those that have Slido loaded, that's amazing. Love it. Gera or Gera, yes. So we will do the poll. The first one is, how many ways do you think there are to connect to Dagger engine? So we've seen 2. There's more than 2. So if anyone feels brave enough to answer, go for it. Jeremy, what do you think? 10. 8. Yes, I know. Let's see. Show results. 6. 46%. 46% thinks there's 6 ways. 43%. 8. 36. 2. 0. Of course, there's more than 2. We already do that. So let's see. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Cool. So let's go to the Dagger documentation, and I want to show you where to find this information. Okay, docs Dagger IO, and then you go to administrator manual. You will go to Dagger engine. So obviously these are, by default, these are not expanded. We expand this Dagger engine, and you want to look at the custom runner. Click on the custom runner. This explains a bunch of things, but the connection interface is where you want to see this. And yes, it is 6. It is 6. Cool. All right. The third way is Podman container. I feel about it exactly as Kai Anar. Amazing comedian. Love him. That's exactly how I feel about Podman container. I hear it's good, but I've never tried it. So if someone does try it, let me know. But I don't know how well it works. Okay. KubePod is another way of connecting to it, but it's a little bit like taking the Bergbahn. You need the Kubernetes Berg. Without that, there's no Bergbahn. I mean, why would you use one? You would take a car, you would take something else. It's slow. It uses kubectl. It has a couple of dependencies on, well, Kubernetes. So if you have it, there's better ways. If you have Dagger running in Kubernetes, there's a better way of connecting to it. But KubePod is an easy way to try out from local Dagger in Kubernetes. Now, if you want to know more about that, we did a video with Eric, I think in January this was, and we were deploying and experimenting Dagger 0.9 on Kubernetes 128. And you can see there like the KubePod right there, the KubePod protocol. So you can check it out. If you want a link, I can drop one later. Cool. Moving on. We're getting to the best part now. So connecting to the Dagger engine directly. No Kubernetes, no Docker, directly to the engine via TCP is my favorite way of using Dagger, because it's quick, it's efficient, and you can tour all of Matterhorn within 30 minutes. It's amazing. It's amazing. Right? It could take you days. It could take you, like, you can make it as long or as short as you want to. But TCP, really, really good. And if you're wondering if I was piloting, no, I wasn't piloting. I was filming. It was me filming. It's not stock footage. It's mine. Cool. So how does this magic work? So these are the commands which you're going to run, and we're going to see how this magic works. And I'm going to, let me just move a couple of things. All right. The first command which I'm going to take is I'm just going to export a variable, which we're going to use as a secret, right? I need this token to create something. If you think I'm going to create a Dagger engine, that's exactly what's going to happen. So what I'm going to do now, I'm calling, by the way, none of this code is local. Everything is remote. All this is called remotely. So I'm calling my Dagger, double R, Dagger. That's how you read that, by the way. And I'm calling the fly.io function from the Dagger module. And I'm giving the token. And what this does, this will create a Dagger engine on fly.io. If you haven't heard of fly.io, it's a platform as a service. So PaaS would be the term. and it just runs containers in Firecracker micro VMs. So that's what's happening here. So I just deployed the latest Dagger engine on fly.io as a container, just the image using this module. And by the way, you can too. Exactly the same command should work for you too. So the next thing which I'm going to do, I'm going to see if I have network connectivity, TCP connectivity to this engine. Can I even resolve this address? Can someone tell me what the problem is? Because the answer is no, I can't. Should I look in the chat? You can unmute yourself, by the way. So there's a problem. What could I be doing wrong? Why is this not resolving? I'll drop the short for you to see. So look which DNS server it's using. It's using my local one, right? Port 53. That's the giveaway. So obviously, I wouldn't deploy Dagger engine and just let anyone in the world connect to it, right? That's crazy. So don't do that. So what I need to do is connect via WireGuard so that I create, like, I get on the private network so I can access the engine directly. So why is it crazy to deploy Dagger engine and leave it accessible publicly? It's like giving someone root privileges on that host. So don't do that. Cool. So I'm going to set up my WireGuard tunnel. I'm going to run this again. Boom. I get an IP address. It's IPv6. And if I drop the short one, you'll see which server it's using to resolve. Right. This is a DNS server that was set up in my local network once I establish that WireGuard connection. Cool. So let's keep going. The magic is this export experimental Dagger runner host. And by the way, we have plans for this. It's likely to change very soon, but for now, this is what we need to do. So once we export the experimental Dagger runner host, and we set it to that host name .internal, and the port is 1750. Why 1750? Because that's when this talk started. That's why. Cool. So I'm going to do Dagger login Dagger because I want us to look at something. So already logged in. And now I'm going to look at all the functions that are available in the Dagger module. So let's see. And while this initializes, I'm going to go to traces. I'm going to refresh this, and there you go, Dagger functions. The reason why I wanted to show you this is for you to see what is happening in the background, because it looks like there's not much happening, but it's the whole initialize phase. And if you go through this, you'll see that actually the whole module, this is a brand new engine. It knows nothing, right? Like vanilla, has it set up. So it needs to obviously start caching a bunch of things. And it pulls down the module. It does like the whole conversion. It just tries basically to interpret the module. It needs to load a bunch of dependencies. So that's what's happening right here behind the scenes. And this makes it super easy to see that. Now, there's a bunch of ways we could have done debug, we could have done verbose. There was a bunch of ways that we could have gotten the same information locally, but I just chose Dagger Cloud for this. Cool. Let's see what else. We have the functions. Okay, so we've seen 47 seconds. Now, if you run it again, right, once the dependencies are there, let's see 2 seconds, right? So really, really quick. How do I know that it's using this remote engine? You may be asking. A couple of ways. Let me just refresh this, waiting for logs, right? I can start seeing logs. And by the way, this engine is deployed in Amsterdam. That's just what I chose. It could have been London. It could have been a couple of regions. I just went for Amsterdam. Cool. So let's try fly.io. If I do fly.io, show me the functions in another module, which it doesn't have, and to go through the same setup, this should be quicker. 4 seconds. Okay, so once all the dependencies were pulled down, the second time a new module was much, much quicker to resolve this. So once again, the experimental Dagger runner host, currently that is the magic, which makes the CLI connect to an explicit engine. And by the way, if I unset that, so unset experimental, and I'll do the functions again, it's just going to be using my local engine. And I say local, it's on my network, it's running on Linux host, but that's how that works. So this variable has priority over anything else. So why would you want to do this? Well, you may want to run Dagger in Switzerland, for example. You have some specific hosts in which you want these engines to run. Maybe they have some special hardware. Maybe they're like in special locations. This is one way of doing that. Cool. Almost there. I think even if we're not good for time, I'm sure you'll give me a few more minutes. So we're going with this. Okay. Unix is a sixth way. And if you're using Unix as the protocol to connect to the engine, you really know what you're doing. It's super fast. It has a couple of implications, but basically it means it's as fast as you can get it. It needs to be local. So yeah, there's a couple of things there. You need to be careful with sharing, how you share it. It's in a way, it's difficult to track when you connect to it and who connects to it. TCP, it's a little bit easier. But if you're using Unix in the context of Dagger CLI, then you really know what you're doing. Exactly like Tom Cruise. All right. If you want to know more about production case in which you would be using Unix, there's an excellent blog post written by Matthias Pan about how to spin up on-demand Dagger engines with Argo CD, EKS, and Carpenter. And Unix is how we connect to those engines. But yes, there's like a lot more than just Unix socket, but it's worth checking out if you haven't seen it already. And this is on the Dagger.io blog. Cool. So, one more question for you all. Which language would you write your first Dagger module in? Let's see. Let's go back here. Let's go back to this one, start, which language, and yeah. So which language would you write your first Dagger module in? You're wondering, Elm, amazing, amazing. HTML, that's crazy. Java, that's a good one. That's a good one. All right, Python, yes. Okay, Kotlin, I don't know what that is. I don't know what it means. But Pascal, I think you won me with that. That basically ages you really, really well. I don't see any COBOL, but anyways. This is great. This is great. Cool. Okay. Let's just wait for this one more participant to type. And by the way, if you want to type some more, you can type some more. We're almost there. We're almost there. So this was Dagger Beyond CI/CD. You know which my email address is. And by the way, I will create Gera as well. Thank you, Johan. I will create that right after this. And if you have any questions for me, I mean, you can take them in the Q&A. Anonymous, assumptions. Okay, so let's take them one by one. Let's start this one, oldest one, anonymous, 19 minutes ago. Gera, right? We will address that. Gera, okay, we will create Gera as well. We'll create them all. I like that. Cool. And not star. I'm not going to cheat. I'm not going to do like a star all. So yeah, I'll create both. Excellent. Anonymous, I had some invalid assumptions when trying to build a multi-arch image with Dagger. What are the differences of the engine to Docker container builders? Okay. Multi-arch image. Off the top of my head, let's see, do we still have this multi-arch? I'm trying to think. I'm just trying to give an example that multi-arch, build multi-arch. There's a cookbook, build multi-arch, CP architectures. Do we mention this? Do we mention this? I think that's the one with cross compilation. Yeah, this is when you use cross compilation. Okay, let me put it this way. If you are running a Linux AMD 64, like a Linux Intel, if the engine is running on Linux Intel, you cannot produce an image, as far as I know. I mean, I think like if you use QEMU, I think it is possible, but by default, you won't be able to build an ARM image, for example. There's like some extra hoops to go through. Now, if you give me a name, I can get back to you on this. So if you leave a name there, who that person was. Cool. I just realized that Jeremy was writing in TypeScript, but called functions from the proxy module in Daggerverse written in Golang. What sorcery is this? Jeremy, do you want to talk about that sorcery?
Well, yeah. I mean, one thing that maybe I didn't underline in my talk was the fact that you can, of course, write Dagger functions in any of the SDK languages. So, you know, Python, Go, TypeScript, or some of the experimental ones that are coming, Java, PHP. There's a bunch. No HTML yet, but and then you can install functions that were written in any language into your module and call those functions from your language. So we'll actually take that Golang proxy module when I installed it and do some code generation. So I have bindings in TypeScript in my case. So I can just call functions that were written in Golang from TypeScript, and they look like TypeScript, they act like TypeScript, but it's the magic of Dagger and that shared API making it all happen. So yeah. Superpower of Dagger.
That's a good one. So when you look at modules, most people assume it's just code, and that is the beginning. But really, what modules do, they extend the Dagger API, and it doesn't really matter what the module is implemented in, because what you care about is those types, right? The types going in and the types coming out, right? Like the values that go in and the values that go out. Any value that comes out, it's a type, it's a Dagger type, right? You can think of it like a Dagger type. So that same type can be passed to another module written in a different language, because it's a type that the module will accept. So that's roughly how that magic works. Cool. Now, there's a couple of things in flight. This is the last slide. Things that I didn't have time for. Some of them I tried, haven't finished. So I had to, like, just today, switch course and adjust this demo a little bit. But these are things that some are closer, some are further, and some require still some improvements within Dagger itself. So I'm going to ask you if you want to let me know what you'd be interested in next time, and maybe we can focus on that next time when we come and present. So this talk, that was actually my first idea for this talk. I was going to serve it just in time, like the slides, everything, from a host that gets provisioned in Switzerland, right? It's a talk built for Switzerland, delivered in Switzerland from a Swiss server. And Dagger would have been just basically putting all that together. That was one idea. The second one is preview environments, and I'm going to give a shout out to Matthias. I know he's in the audience, or he was earlier. We did some amazing things with this in the context of Dagger for our own needs, the Dagger Cloud, the Daggerverse, so on and so forth. So I think we could do a pretty nice talk about that if anyone's interested, how we use Dagger at Dagger for preview environments. Then WireGuard everywhere, right? WireGuard is fairly important, especially if you are security conscious and if you're connecting to various locations and you want to mesh all of that together. So big WireGuard fan here. And your own AI, right? I had to mention AI today. It had to be mentioned, right? Because everyone's thinking about it. Maybe you're sick and tired about it. But the idea is you could have your own. So there is a possibility that Dagger simplifies the entire setup, the Olama, the Fabric, the whole thing. Now, you do need an NVIDIA GPU. If you don't have it, it's going to be slow. It'll still work, but it will be slow. You can have your own prompt. You can have your own CLI. All of that, can be put together, packaged really, really nicely, and used really, really nicely. And lastly, we could run, in theory, and it is actually closer to reality, we could run a GitHub Actions runner inside Dagger. Why would you want to do that? Well, right now in most architectures, you run the CI runner alongside Dagger, and the CI runner connects to Dagger. But how cool would it be if the runner itself could run in Dagger? It can be managed. It's a bit more secure. There's a couple of advantages there. Anyway, just throwing a few ideas. You let me know what you think. But that is it.